I didn't know what I was signing up for when I took the job. The listing was vague. Night security technician, remote monitoring facility, $28 per hour, housing included. It was buried deep in the classified section of an old website I used to check when things got desperate. I'd just been let go from my job at the warehouse, and rent was creeping up behind me like a loaded gun. So I clicked, filled out a short form, and didn't think twice. 2 days later, I got a call. No interview, no screening, just a voice telling me to meet a black van behind the strip mall on Route 5, midnight sharp. "Bring clothes for cold weather," the voice said. "You'll be gone a while." I didn't ask questions. I should have, but the check they promised was enough to cover 3 months of rent, and that was all I needed to hear. The van arrived exactly on time. Blacked out windows, no markings. The driver didn't speak. He slid open the door and nodded. I climbed in, half expecting to see others, but I was the only passenger. We drove for over 2 hours in silence. No music, no phone signal, just pine trees and darkness, and the dull hum of tires on cracked asphalt. I tried to keep track of our route, but the roads got narrower and more twisted the farther we went. Eventually, the GPS on my phone just gave up. Around 2:15 a.m., we pulled up to a chain-link gate wrapped in razor wire. A keypad lit up as the driver leaned out and entered a code. The gate creaked open. Beyond it was a long gravel path lined with floodlights, and at the end of that path, set against the base of a dead mountain, was a concrete building, windowless, 2 stories tall. The kind of place you'd expect to see on the edge of some old Cold War missile range. No signage, just a rusting metal door and a keypad beside it. Inside, the air was cold and dry, like a museum that hadn't opened in decades. The hallway stretched forward longer than it looked from the outside. It was dead quiet, except for the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. No welcome, no orientation. Just another man waiting near the end of the hall, holding a clipboard. Bald, heavy set, didn't tell me his name. He pointed down a side corridor and said, "You're in Unit 6, instructions are inside." Then he walked away. Unit 6 was small, barely enough space for a cot, a mini fridge, and a desk with a terminal on it. The walls were thick concrete, painted a dull grey, and there were no windows, no clock either. Just a single overhead light that never turned off unless you flicked the breaker manually. The instructions on the desk were typewritten, like they'd been copied 100 times over. They told me the basics. Log your observations hourly, stay in your section, don't interact with the other staff unless necessary. Most importantly, never, under any circumstances, open the containers. They are not for inspection. You are not qualified to determine anomalies. That word, anomalies, was the first real red flag. But I was already locked in for 6 weeks. The pay was wired in advance, and my phone, keys, even my watch had been collected before I was brought inside. The only time I saw the outside world after that first night was during the changeover at the end of the rotation. They called it a storage facility, but that's not what it was. Not really. Each level was divided into long, narrow corridors, like rows of shipping containers, stacked with military precision. But none of the containers had markings. No numbers, no barcodes, just smooth black panels with locking mechanisms that looked custom-made. Each one had a motion sensor above it and a small red light that would blink when anything inside shifted. My job was to monitor the lights. That was it. Every hour, I'd walk the corridor, note any changes, and log them on the terminal. If a red light blinked more than 3 times in a shift, I was to call it in. Otherwise, I was told to keep walking. I asked once what was inside them. The man who delivered the meal trays just said, "Not your business." Then he smiled in a way that made it clear he wasn't joking. The first week was quiet. Lights rarely blinked. Most nights I paced the same dull hallway, scribbled the same numbers, and went back to my cot to read a paperback I'd found in the common area. But around day 10, something changed. The lights started flickering, only for a second, but in a way that felt deliberate, like someone was standing just inside the containers, waiting for me to pass before tapping once on the inside wall. At first, I blamed my eyes. The fluorescent lights weren't reliable. They buzzed and dimmed all the time. But on the 12th night, I heard something. A sound I still haven't been able to forget. It was faint, like a fingernail dragged across corrugated steel. Then a second one. Then something like breath. Not panting, not moaning, just breath. Deep and slow, like something enormous was sleeping in there and had started to dream. The red light blinked once. I froze. Then it blinked again, and again, 3 times. I stood there for maybe a full minute before I remembered what I was supposed to do. I jogged back to the terminal, picked up the handset, and pressed the call button. There was no dial tone, just a recorded voice. Section 6, report. Container 13, triple blink, auditory anomaly, possible movement, please advise. The line was quiet for a beat. Then, acknowledged, log it, resume patrol. That was it. No follow-up. No one came to check. I logged it and finished the rest of my shift, half expecting the container door to burst open behind me every time I passed it. Nothing happened. The next night, the same container blinked twice, then went still. But 3 nights later, something new started. It was about 3:40 a.m. I'd just finished logging container 7, which had been blinking all shift, and I was about to turn the corner when I noticed something odd. The door to container 5, it was ajar, only by a few inches, but it was unmistakable. I froze. Every door in that place was supposed to be sealed with an internal locking mechanism that only supervisors could open. I'd never seen one loose before, and what scared me most wasn't that it was open, but that the motion sensor light above it wasn't blinking at all, like whatever was inside wasn't moving anymore. I backed away slowly, then turned and ran the full length of the corridor back to the call station. My heart was in my throat. I picked up the phone and hit the button. Nothing. Deadline. That was the moment I realized I was completely alone. The rest of the facility was silent. The lights above me flickered once, then steadied. I considered breaking protocol, opening the main door and trying to find one of the other techs. But the instructions had been clear. Never leave your sector unless authorized. And if I did, I had no idea what I'd find on the other side. So I waited, sat at the desk, watched the clock on the terminal. The red light over container 5 never blinked, but the door stayed open the rest of the night. By morning, it was closed again. No log entry, no acknowledgement from the system, just sealed, like nothing had happened. And that was the night I stopped sleeping, because that was the night I realized the containers weren't just holding things, they were watching. I started leaving the hallway lights on after that night. Before, I'd been turning them off at the end of my rounds. Like the handbook said, save power, avoid overheating the circuits, keep the system quiet during inactive hours. But I didn't care about that anymore. I wanted to see every shadow, every inch of floor, every glint of movement reflected in that polished concrete. The days, if you can even call them that, inside a place with no windows, blurred into each other. I couldn't tell when I was supposed to be awake or asleep anymore. I just followed the rounds, walked the corridor, watched the lights, write the reports, eat whatever heat-lamped tray they slid through the door. One night I noticed something else. It started small. Container 12, same wing as mine, had never blinked. Ever. No red lights, no sounds, nothing. But suddenly the temperature around it was different. Not warm, not cold. Wrong. Like the air pressure shifted near it. The way your ears pop on a plane, except it was just one spot in a hallway underground. The hair on my arms stood up the second I got near it, and there was this metallic taste in my mouth, like old batteries. I wrote it down in the log. No one ever responded. I tried to bring it up to the man who dropped off my meals. Same guy as always. Shaved head, name tag that just said H. He was halfway to the lift when I asked him, "Hey, what's in container 12? He didn't even turn around, just said, "Not ours to question," and kept walking. That became the default answer for everything in that place. Not ours to question, not ours to open, not ours to understand. But that answer started to crack for me the night the screaming started. It didn't come from inside a container. It came from the floor above me. I was halfway through a patrol when I heard it. Raw, ragged, human, screaming. Not angry, not frightened. Desperate. Like someone was trying to claw their way through steel. I ran back to the intercom and punched the call button over and over, still dead. So I just stood there, staring at the ceiling, frozen in place while the sound tore through the ducts and settled in the pit of my stomach like acid. It went on for a full minute, then silence. When the next shift arrived the following night, I asked the guy if he'd heard anything. He stared at me like I'd spoken a different language, just shrugged and said, "They said your wing might be due for calibration." Then he handed me a new clipboard and walked off. Calibration. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. But from that point on, I started hearing it from the other techs too. That container's probably just miscalibrated. The sensors are due for calibration, as if it was a magic word that made any abnormal thing suddenly fine. A few nights later, I decided to test something, probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. There was a maintenance hatch on the floor near container 14, the kind they use to access plumbing or electrical conduits. I'd walked past it for weeks without giving it a second thought. But that night, I noticed the bolts around the edge had been unscrewed, just enough to loosen the seal. I don't know if it had always been that way, or if something had changed, but I felt it. That same pressure in the air, like the hallway was holding its breath. I waited until the cameras rotated. Yes, they had cameras. Dome-shaped black glass mounted every 20 feet. No red light, but they moved. You could hear the tiny click when they rotated. I learned their rhythm within the first week, every 62 seconds. So when it turned away, I knelt down and pulled the hatch open, just enough to look inside. It was pitch black. I leaned closer and heard something I still don't have words for. Not a sound exactly, more like a feeling pressed into my ears, a vibration. Not electrical, organic, like something alive breathing through stone. My skin prickled all over. The back of my tongue went numb. And then, I swear to you, I heard my name. Not shouted, not whispered, just said, soft, close, like someone was crouched just beneath the floorboards, with their mouth an inch from the grate. I slammed it shut and bolted back to my unit. Didn't even log the rest of the patrol that night. Just curled up on the cot with my back to the wall, watching the door until the light changed. That was the first night I dreamed of the hallway. I was walking it in the dream, but the containers weren't locked. They were open, just a crack, enough to see inside. But I couldn't see the contents, only reflections. Of myself, hundreds of me, standing inside each one, but not quite right. Their eyes were off, or their arms were bent wrong. Some were crying, some smiling, some completely still, and all of them watching me. I woke up in a sweat, the kind that clings to your chest like ice, and for a split second, I thought I was still in the dream, because the door to my unit was slightly open. It had never been opened before. They didn't give us keys, just manual locks that sealed automatically when shut. The hallway was empty, the lights were on, no noise. But the sense that something had been standing in that doorway a moment before, it hung in the air like smoke. That was when I realized something else. Something that still makes my blood run cold. Every time I walked the corridor, I assumed I was alone, that it was just me and the containers. But I started noticing these tiny changes. The angle of the camera dome, a fingerprint on a wall, a boot print that wasn't mine. I started leaving small signs behind, tiny marks with my fingernail along the edge of the corner, a piece of thread from my sleeve caught on a corner, nothing too obvious. And the next night, they were gone, wiped clean. Someone or something was walking the halls when I wasn't, or when I wasn't supposed to be aware of it. I stopped sleeping after that. Started staying up in the chair by the door, holding the flashlight they'd issued us like it was a weapon. The batteries didn't last long, but the weight in my hand helped, gave me the illusion of control. Some nights, I swear I heard breathing just outside the door, always soft, always timed with the click of the camera dome. There were other techs, supposedly. I heard them sometimes, muffled voices from other sectors, but I never saw them, never passed them in the corridors. And I started wondering, how many of us were even down there? Were the voices real, or just echoes of something the walls wanted me to hear? By the 5th week, I had a theory. Those containers didn't just hold things, they mirrored them. Whatever was inside didn't stay inside. It learned, listened, studied you, and eventually, it started reflecting pieces of you back. The containers weren't holding objects, they were holding possibilities, variants, wrong versions of whatever they touched, including us. I started noticing details in my own reflection, slight inconsistencies. My left eye twitching when I smiled, a freckle that didn't used to be there, a scar I don't remember getting. I'd stare at the mirror above the sink in my unit and feel like I was looking at someone pretending to be me. And the worst part, he looked more comfortable than I did, like he knew something I didn't, like he'd been here longer. The day I stopped trusting the lights was the day I realized I wasn't just losing sleep, I was losing time. I was on my usual patrol, walking past Container 9 when the hallway lights flickered. Not a power surge, not that gentle pulse from old bulbs. It was something more deliberate, sharp, like someone flipping a switch off and on. I stopped walking, checked the time on my watch. 1:12 a.m., not unusual. Took a breath, blinked once, maybe twice, and kept going. But when I reached the next intersection, the one that turns left toward the core hallway, I noticed something wrong. The lights were back to normal, steady, the kind of steady you don't notice unless something was wrong before. I glanced at my watch again. 1:47 a.m., 35 minutes, gone. Completely wiped from my memory. No sense of movement, no transition. Just one step in front of Container 9 and then suddenly standing at the next hallway like I'd teleported across reality. I tried to laugh it off, told myself I was overworked, sleep deprived. Maybe I'd just walked the hall and forgotten. Maybe my brain had gone on autopilot. But that wasn't the part that scared me. What scared me was what I saw on the floor when I turned around. My boot prints, doubled back on themselves, as if I had walked that path twice in 2 different directions. But there were only ever my prints in that hallway. No one else walked it but me, unless it hadn't been me. The next night, I left a note in my locker, just a simple one, scribbled on the back of an empty inspection form. If anything happens to me, check Container 9. I don't think it's stable. When I came back from rounds an hour later, the note was gone. Locker door still shut, same as I left it. Everything untouched. except the note. I started sleeping with my boots on. You don't think much about how quickly you can move until you're afraid to blink. I'd sit upright on the cot, listening to the soft mechanical hum in the walls, the ventilation system, the humming lights, the buzz from the containment panels. But some nights, there'd be something else underneath it. A clicking, not mechanical, rhythmic, like fingernails tapping a desk. Sometimes it came from the hallway, sometimes from the vent above my bed. Once, I swear, it was coming from under the floor, directly beneath my cot. 5 slow taps, then nothing, then 5 more. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I started noticing patterns in the noise, not just tapping, breathing too. Breathing that didn't match my own. Like someone was copying the rhythm of my breath and lagging just a half second behind. I'd hold mine just to test it, and sure enough, another breath would come a moment later, long, drawn out, like it was waiting for me to exhale first. I tried to mention it on the next resupply. Same guy showed up, H. I asked him straight out, "Are there people living in the walls here?" He didn't flinch, just tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to something only he could hear. Then he muttered, "Everything here echoes. That's all it is." That's all it is. Echoes. Is that what I was supposed to believe? That the figure I saw at the end of the corridor 3 nights later was just an echo? It didn't move like an echo. I was halfway through a midnight check, logging the sensor readings like usual. When I rounded the far end near Container 3, there was someone standing under the emergency light. Back turned, shoulders hunched. They weren't in uniform. No patch, no nameplate. Just a plain shirt, torn at the collar. The air felt heavy, the way it does right before a thunderstorm. I opened my mouth to speak, but stopped, because the figure turned around slowly, and it was my face. Not a lookalike. Not someone who resembled me. It was me. Same jaw. Same eyes. But the skin was grayish, like paper soaked in water. And the eyes weren't focused on me. They were looking past me, like they were staring through time itself. The figure raised its hand, my hand, and pointed at Container 3. Then it whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but I felt it. A pressure behind the eyes, like the words were injected straight into my skull instead of through my ears. I took a step back, not breathing, not blinking, and it vanished. No sound, no flash, just gone. I stared at Container 3 for what felt like hours. Its panel still green, no warning, no anomalies. But the longer I looked, the more the surface of it shimmered, like heat waves. And underneath that shimmer, I thought I saw movement, just for a second, like fingers pressing against the inside of a plastic sheet. That was the night I finally broke the rule. I tried to leave. I packed what little I had, my jacket, a flashlight, my notebook, waited until the lights dimmed for the hourly diagnostics. When the camera rotated away, I made a break for the lift. The door was already open, no one in sight. I hit the top floor button. Nothing happened. I hit it again. Still nothing. And then, without warning, the panel turned red and displayed a message I'd never seen before. Containment override in progress. Clearance required. Override? There wasn't supposed to be an override. No mention of it in the handbook. No protocol for what to do. I tried the radio. Static. Tried every button on the panel. The elevator didn't move, so I took the stairs. 32 flights. I don't remember most of it. Just the sound of my boots pounding metal, my breath tearing through my throat, the stairwell lights flickering above me every few steps. When I got to the surface door, it was chained shut. Not locked. Chained. As if someone, or something, was meant to be kept in. or out. I started banging, screaming, hoping anyone topside could hear me. No response. But the worst part was when I stopped to catch my breath and heard someone else banging back. From the other side of the door, but not in rhythm, not in panic, in code, like Morse, deliberate, repeating, tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 pause. It went on for minutes. I backed away slowly, hands still on the railing, eyes fixed on the door. Then it stopped, and a voice whispered, clear as day, through the crack at the bottom of the door, "You're not ready to leave." I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. I tried. I laid on the cot with my eyes shut, counting the seconds in my head, forcing my lungs to breathe in and out like they were on a metronome. But the second I started to drift, I'd feel it. That presence, just outside the door, never loud, never aggressive, just waiting. Sometimes I'd hear soft footsteps down the hall. Sometimes a metallic scrape like something sharp dragging across concrete. Once, I swear I heard my own voice whispering my name from the other side of the room. But when I opened my eyes, the room was empty, still, cold. The next day, I found something slipped under my door. Not a note, not an order, just a photograph, black and white, curling at the corners. It was the hallway near container 12, lit by overhead fluorescence. But in the picture, every light was off, except one. A single bulb shining down on a figure in the distance. Its back turned, head tilted, shoulders hunched in that same unnatural way I'd seen before. There was something scratched into the back of the photo in ink that had started to smear. Just one sentence. "You're seeing the wrong version of things." That was all it said. I carried that picture in my back pocket for a while, like a charm. Not because it comforted me, but because I needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. When resupply came again, I didn't bother with small talk. I grabbed H by the arm before he could disappear into his truck and said, "I need answers. What the hell are we storing down here?" He didn't even blink, just looked at me with that tired, flat stare and said, "We're not storing anything." Then he climbed into his cab and drove off. That's when it hit me. The label wasn't wrong. This place isn't a storage facility. It's a cage. And whatever's in those containers, whatever's behind those metal walls, it's not just waiting quietly, it's learning. That night, the power flickered again. But it wasn't the usual dimming or surge. It went out completely. Emergency lighting didn't kick in. No red glow, no backup hum, nothing. Just silence. And dark. I stayed still in the dark for maybe a minute before I lit my flashlight. That's when I saw it, on the inside of the window that separated the monitoring room from the hallway. A smear, hand-shaped, not pressed from inside the room, pressed from the other side, from inside the glass. That shouldn't have been possible. That glass is 2 inches thick, reinforced, sealed on both sides. But there it was. 5 long streaks. Fingers. As if someone, or something, had tried to push through. And in the center of the handprint, a single eye had been drawn in what looked like oil or ink. Crude, primitive, but unmistakably watching. I blinked just once, and when my flashlight passed back over the window, it was gone. Clean. Like it had never been there at all. I tried every switch in the facility. Nothing worked. Power didn't come back on until 4:13 a.m. precisely, as if whatever had taken it away had returned it on schedule, on its own terms. After that, I started noticing the changes in myself. I'd look in the mirror and see something off, just for a split second. like my reflection blinked before I did, or my smile held a second too long. Once, during my nightly rounds, I saw myself walking ahead of me, my shape, my walk, the back of my head rounding the corner at Container 5. I ran after it, panicked, but when I turned the corner, the hallway was empty, silent, except for my radio, crackling. And then, my voice came through it, not recorded, not distorted, my voice. But I hadn't said anything. It just said, "Why are you chasing me?" Then silence. That night I dreamed about the hallway, but it was upside down. I was walking on the ceiling, lights flickering below me like stars. All the containers were open, but nothing inside them. Just gaping blackness and the sound of breathing from the other side. I woke up with blood on my pillow, just a trickle from the nose, maybe from stress, maybe from something else. I wrote another note, this one longer, detailed, about everything: the print, the blackout, the photograph, the voices, the mirror. I sealed it in an envelope and hid it behind panel 4 of the breaker room. No one ever checks there. I wasn't writing it for anyone else. I was writing it for myself, in case I forgot. Because lately, I've been forgetting things. Not just time, but basics. My name, my birthday, where I grew up. Sometimes I look at my own signature and it feels like someone else wrote it. One night, while inspecting Container 10, I heard laughter. Not malicious, just playful. A child. It echoed faintly from inside the container. I pressed my ear to the wall, ignoring every protocol, and whispered, "Is someone in there?" The laughter stopped. A tiny voice whispered back, "We're all in here." I staggered back so fast I tripped, landed hard on the floor. My flashlight flickered once, then died. For a full 30 seconds, I sat in total blackness, waiting for the door to open, for something to crawl out. But it didn't. Not yet. When the lights returned, everything was normal, except the container. The lock was gone. The handle was melted, and carved into the center of the door, in perfect symmetry, was that same eye from the photograph. From that moment on, I stopped sleeping entirely. The cot stayed empty. I started walking constantly, pacing the halls like a rat trapped in a cage. My boots wore grooves into the floor. I think the walls noticed. I think whatever's behind them knows I'm not like the others. It started responding to me, whispers that align with my thoughts, a chill that moves when I do, shadows that stop when I stop. And just a few nights ago, the speaker system, one I haven't heard in weeks, crackled to life at 3:06 a.m. with a single word: closer. I didn't move, didn't breathe, but the hallway got colder, like it was expecting me, like it knew I'd eventually step closer. And maybe I will, not because I want to, but because part of me already has, and the part that's still resisting, that part's starting to fade. I think the scariest part wasn't what I saw, it was what I started to understand. That everything here, every detail, every rule, every locked container and silent hallway, it was all designed for one thing: delay. Not prevention, not safety, just buying time. Time from what? I still don't know. But the walls are cracking, and whatever's on the other side is getting bolder. 3 nights ago, I woke up standing, not on the cot, not even in the monitoring room. I was in hallway C, barefoot, shirt soaked with sweat, hand pressed against container 12. And my mouth was whispering something, over and over. I didn't know the words, I wasn't thinking them, but they came anyway, fast, like a chant that had been waiting behind my teeth for hours. I yanked my hand back like it burned me, but it didn't. It felt cold, damp, maybe, or alive. The metal was vibrating under my palm. No lights were on. I hadn't turned them off. I hadn't touched anything, but the hallway was completely dark. Except one thing. The keypad beside the container. Its screen was glowing blue, not red like usual, and it showed a word. Not a number. A word. Yes! I backed away, heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else out. I thought I was hallucinating. I convinced myself of that until I turned around and found a smear of ink across my forearm. It wasn't from the door. It wasn't from any equipment. It was handwritten. 3 symbols I didn't recognize. But when I blinked, they shifted. And for a moment, I swear they looked like my name. That same morning, the backup logs had been wiped. Completely clean. No video from the last 2 weeks. No motion tracking. No time-stamped door logs. Just a single file left behind. Audio only. 4 seconds long. It was breathing. Slow, steady. Then a voice, low and whispering. I like you better when you're quiet. That was it. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I even tell? Every resupply since then has come in silence. They don't ask questions. They don't look at me. I don't even know if they're the same people anymore. They wear the same jackets, drive the same trucks, but their eyes don't blink the same way. Their shadows don't move right. I found a crowbar in the maintenance closet last night. I don't know what I plan to do with it. I think part of me was ready to pry open one of the containers, to look the thing in the face, to end the waiting. But when I got to the door, the lock was already open. No damage, no signs of forced entry, just dangling, like someone had walked out 5 minutes earlier. I didn't open it. I just stood there, gripping the crowbar until my hands hurt. Then I turned around. The hallway behind me was filled with fog. I hadn't noticed it roll in. It didn't come from the vents or outside. It just was. And through that fog, I saw figures, not moving, just standing, lined along the walls, every one of them in a uniform like mine. Faces blurred, as if something had smudged them with charcoal. They didn't speak. They didn't breathe. They waited. And in the center of them all, one figure stepped forward. I recognized the posture before I recognized the face. It was me, but not like a mirror, not like a twin. It was drained, like someone had carved me hollow and left the shape behind. It smiled, just enough to make me feel cold in my spine. Then it raised its hand, and in its palm was the same photograph I'd kept hidden weeks ago, the one I'd buried under the breaker panel, still curling at the edges, still stained at the bottom corner. But now the figure in the photo had turned around. Its face was blank, but it was looking straight at me. I dropped the crowbar. It clanged loud enough to break the fog, and just like that, they were gone. No footsteps, no dispersal, just absence. The silence that followed was worse than the fog. That was last night. Today there are new signs posted around the facility. White signs. No logos, no warnings. Just one phrase printed in stark black font. Do not interact with the version of yourself that knocks. I haven't knocked on any doors. I haven't touched the glass. But sometimes I hear it. Late at night. Knocking. 3 taps. Then silence. Then a voice that sounds like mine. Let me in. I sit by the cot and cover my ears and whisper to myself until it fades. But it's getting louder, stronger, more confident, like it knows I'm cracking. I've tried to quit. I wrote a resignation, typed it out, printed it, sealed it. The next morning, the envelope was empty. The page was gone, but the printer log said I'd printed something. 1 page, title, intake form, new replacement, name, Richard, status, approved. I haven't seen the exit gate in 3 weeks. The code doesn't work anymore. The keypad just flashes red and says, cycle incomplete. Cycle of what? I don't know. I think the place is watching me. I think it always has been. The real question isn't what we're storing. It's what we're becoming. Because I can't remember the sound of my voice anymore unless I hear it echoing down the hallway. I don't trust my own shadow. I check my reflection to make sure it blinks when I do. And sometimes it doesn't. This morning I opened the locker that used to hold my ID, and there was a note inside. 1 sentence. Thank you for staying. It wasn't signed, but I think I know who left it. And I think they're still here. Not inside a container. Not behind a wall. Right here. Sitting in this room. Using my hands. Writing this story. Waiting for the next knock. The next version. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're already on your way. Just don't forget to smile when they ask your name. And whatever you do, don't look into the mirror on your first night. It won't blink, but it'll smile. And that's how you'll know you're home.